Hey everyone, it's Jonathan, and welcome to the final episode in our mini-series on Disney's Tinkerbell franchise. Again, my guest for this series has been Katie Fabrick. In the previous episodes, we've covered the first 3 films of the franchise, as well as 2 specials, and today we're going to finish out the series talking about Secret of the Wings, The Pirate Fairy, and Tinkerbell and the Legend of the NeverBeast. Well, after this is where I feel like things almost start turning around for the series. Like, I don't
Mm.
know how you feel. Apparently, your family didn't like the last one, but I feel like with the next one, Secret of the Wings, not that it's significantly better than the rest of them, the ones that have come before, but I
Hmm.
feel like I was more invested in this at this point.
Okay.
Not that I loved it or anything, but like I enjoyed it more than I had previously. This one is about Tinkerbell discovering that she has a sister because going back to the being born of a baby's laugh, they introduced a new thing where if a baby's laugh splits in two, the 2 fairies born out of the same baby's laugh are sisters.
Hmm.
Kind of twins. They sort of look similar. They have identical wings, but sisters. And something happened when they were born so that her sister ended up going to the winter fairies and she ended up with the rest of the fairies. And this is where you also get the complication of the winter fairies are sequestered. They're like on an island away from everybody else, and they are never allowed to see each other
Yeah.
for some reason. They kind of explain that, but I feel like the reasoning ended up being so thin that it's kind of ridiculous that they decided to keep them apart.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one starts with the fairies all preparing for winter, and they explain that all of the seasons happen simultaneously on the island, and I was like, did we know this before? Because
Yes.
I guess now that you mentioned that they actually were in the winter area in the first movie,
Hmm.
okay. But I don't know that they made it very clear. So this was the first time that I really noticed that there is a season happening in each area of this island or whatever Pixie Hollow is. Like at this point, I had completely forgotten that this was tied into Peter Pan. I didn't remember until the next one that this was Neverland. I was like, oh, wait a minute. I forgot. This is Neverland.
Yeah.
Because they always like refer to it as the mainland. So in my head, Pixie Hollow is like an island across a river from I don't
From
know.
London.
Yeah, something like that. I don't know. Anyway, all of the seasons are happening simultaneously. So I was confused as to why they have to prepare for winter because they're moving all of the animals that live in Pixie Hollow over to the winter area. And like they were talking about preparing for winter, and I thought they were talking about preparing for winter on the mainland. But then they're moving all of the animals from one season to the next. But like, why? I was very confused.
Yeah, like I think the idea is that while they have the seasons on like everywhere on the island, like the animals move throughout it and they like it is a bit confusing. Like, do they take the because like the entire way that the Pixie Hollow works is like they paint the ladybugs and the butterflies and all that, which like kind of makes sense in a way, but also you're like, okay, but if we paint the butterflies while winter's going on and then spring we get butterflies, like what happens with the caterpillar to chrysalis to butterfly section?
Well,
And then
that's
like,
why I was confused because up until now, I've just been under the assumption that everything that they're doing is for the mainland.
yeah. And so like it's like, well, if we go under that logic, then are we changing the rabbit's coats from summer coats to winter coats by them going into winter? But also then did we take all rabbits across the world back to Pixie Hollow and then like
Yeah.
change it like having it disconnected that they do everything that changes over seasons into Pixie Hollow. Like, are those different rabbits? I don't know. Maybe your little pet rabbit is a different rabbit during winter and they just swap them out. I'm unsure exactly like how that plays out
Hmm.
entirely. Like again, it's one of those things where you have your lore, but as you have more lore, it makes less
Yes.
sense.
Yes, exactly. The more complications they introduce, the
The
more
more problems.
the whole story falls apart.
It's kind of like I feel like the Tinkerbell show series is like if you have a pipe that runs water and then you have a small leak and they put something over it, like they slap some flex tape over it, but then that causes pressure in another area which starts to burst, and then they just slap more flex tape, and they're not actually fixing the problem. They're just slapping flex tape, like this is how this works. Don't worry about it. And you're like, but no, there's all these other holes popping out of your pipe, and you haven't fixed any of those. You're just slapping fixed tape everywhere
You know,
and causing more pressure.
now that you're making that analogy, I bet that's what killed the series. Because
Mm-hmm.
on the Wikipedia page for the last movie, they talk about the sequels. Like there was supposed to be at least a seven and an eight.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up getting canceled because they were having too many story problems. I wonder if those story problems were caused by all of the retconning and lore meddling that they kept doing in all the other
Yeah.
movies. It ended up breaking the plans that they had to the point where they realized we can't make this tie in with Peter Pan anymore. Let's just end this.
Yeah.
Anyways, back to these animals. This also made me question, what do the animals eat? Because I feel like there was something in the beginning, and you get more in the last movie with hawks. Like obviously there are predators, but here you have rabbits coexisting with weasels.
Mm-hmm.
Weasels eat rabbits.
Yeah.
So what are they feeding these weasels? How do weasels survive in Pixie Hollow?
Like yeah, like again, like just as more stuff happens, you start asking more questions and
Hmm.
questions that you really shouldn't be asking, but they create situations where you're asking these strange questions.
Yes. And speaking of questions, thankfully one that actually gets answered because Tinkerbell wants to visit Winter, but she's not allowed. And I was like, who is making these rules? Well, we actually get an answer to that question later on. But
Yeah.
she ends up sneaking across the border and her wings start glowing. And she goes home and no one will believe her. And they insist that she see the healing fairy because they think that something's wrong with her. She's because she went to the cold, it has damaged her in some way.
Hmm.
And I found it interesting. I didn't realize at first, but Jodie Benson plays the healing fairy.
Yeah.
She's not it's not a huge role, but I thought it was interesting that they got her for that. And then obviously nothing is really wrong with her. And I figured that this was leading to a revelation that there was nothing wrong with crossing over into winter, which I guess is not true because I guess there is a problem. So she starts researching what was going on with her wings, but the page of the book that has the answers is half eaten by a bookworm. I was like, why do they keep a bookworm in the library if it's going to destroy the books? It's like the bookworm is apparently allowed to be there, but it's eating everything and it's destroying crucial fairy knowledge.
Yeah. Humor, it's funny.
I
Also,
guess
who
so.
who keep books? Because we find out there's the bookkeeper. But like what's his talent? Is he the only bookkeeper?
I don't know. I
Like is
guess
his yeah, like he gets his own special categorization, I guess. Like we've destroyed the one basic system that we have built, and it's the talent system because now we have a bookkeeper who doesn't technically fall under any of the talents.
maybe he's one of the ones that got expelled from whatever they were supposed to do
Uh
and he picked up a new talent.
he's like, all right, I can't be a frost fair anymore because of my frost crimes, so I'm gonna go be a bookkeeper now.
Uh-huh. But yeah, she can't find the information that she wants in the half-eaten book. So she finds out that there is this keeper of fairy knowledge, but he's a winter fairy, so she can't talk to him. So
Uh-huh.
she decides to sneak across the border in a basket carried by an owl. And she finds this guy, and he has probably the worst example of CGI in the whole movie because he has this lynx that is so not the same style as everything else. It's not cute. It just feels Like it's not as bad as like early CGI, like pre-Toy Story levels, but it's
Hmm.
not as good as the rest of this. It just has this uncanny valley look to it. I
Yeah.
really didn't like this Lynx.
Yeah.
But from this guy, she finds out that she has a sister because she hears him talking to somebody who has the same glowing wing issue that she does. And she discovers Periwinkle, who was born from the same laugh that she was born from. So they become friends, and he tells her that she has to go back, but she says she did, but he didn't say when. So they're going around Winterland, and you meet different winter fairies. You have Debbie Ryan in here, more Disney synergy, playing a fairy named Spike. And I was surprised that she didn't get a song because up until now, you've got all these big Disney Channel names, and
Hmm.
like Zendaya gets the song in her special, but the song in this one was The Great Divide by the McLean sisters. And I don't know how the timeline lines up, but one of them, China Anne McLean, ended up becoming a Disney kid. She had a show called Ant Farm,
Hmm.
which I know I watched some of that, but I don't remember if I ever finished that show because that was about the time where I was like Shayna and I weren't watching Disney Channel anymore together anymore. So I think I just kind of fell out of keeping up with
Yeah.
everything.
Hmm.
And I know she went on to do more than just that because she was in the Descendants series and she's had a few other roles, but I don't think she ever was a fairy in this. She just had that song. But anyways, Debbie Ryan was one of the fairies, and also Matt Lanter played Sled. And I was listening to his voice. I was like, why do I know this voice? Why do I know this voice? So I looked him up. I was like, oh, he's Anakin in the Clone Wars series.
Yeah, right.
And then you also have Lord Mallory, who you get the idea that he is the originator of this rule. And he was another one where I was like, why do I know this guy? Why do I know this voice? Timothy Dalton, another big name that they've got for some reason. Like they weirdly got big names for a bunch of roles in these movies. Even
Yeah.
ones that were like small roles. Not that he's a
Hmm.
small role. And he comes back in another movie, but I don't remember if he had any lines in the other movie. Maybe he didn't.
I don't think he does. I think he just like he either has one line or he like just is there because time has passed. Winter fairies are hanging out with the other fairies now.
Yeah. But eventually they decide to take Periwinkle back to, I guess, the land of summer. I don't know. The part of Pixie Hollow that she lives in. And she wants to tell the queen of what's going on. And she says that she'll make the Lord of Winter change his rules. So she invents this snow machine that will sprinkle snow on Periwinkle while she's in the land so that she won't get too hot. And she introduces her to everybody. But before they get to the queen, it runs out of ice and Periwinkle's wings start wilting. So they have to rush her back before she dies or something. But then you discover that the queen was the reason that this rule exists. They have this story about two fairies who fell in love, and as soon as she started telling the story, I was like, "Well, it's obviously the Queen and Lord Mallory."
Yeah.
like they make it like to be like this big revelation at the end, but like the second she started talking, I was like, "She's talking about herself."
Yeah.
But they had this romance. One fairy was from the warm seasons and the other was from the winter, and ended up with one of them crossing the border, and something happened, and one of them broke a wing, and there's no cure for a broken wing. So she decided that they have to keep the land separate for the safety of all the fairies. Okay.
Because
I feel like you
because
could have figured out something better than this, but okay.
yeah, and like also like, no one's ever thought to cross the barrier since then.
Yeah.
No one's ever broken a wing on a tree branch.
But this is why, like I mentioned before, this is where I started thinking like, even though like fairy culture, whatever, has been apparently around for thousands of years, the way they live now, it has to only date back like 100 years or however old Queen Clarion is.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the stuff seems to be because of stuff that she has made up.
Yeah.
Because I don't think she's thousands of years old. Because
I
she
don't
talks
think
about
so.
I don't remember which one she's talking about things happening like 100 years ago. I don't know. Like the timeline is confusing, and maybe it's something that I'm just overthinking because I'm watching these all together in a short amount of time.
Hmm.
And The point of these movies is to entertain kids once every couple of years when they release a new one. And kids aren't going to think about this stuff. But anyways, eventually Lord Mallory knocks her snow machine into the river, which somehow causes like a day after tomorrow ice age. For some random reason. It makes no sense because this thing she invented was basically a pile of acorns and a cheese grater. Like, how on
Yeah.
earth does this cause an apocalypse? I just, as soon as that started happening, I just started laughing. I was like, this is so ridiculous. And like, not that I'm saying that this makes this movie terrible or anything. I enjoyed this one more than I had previously, but I had so many questions. Even though I enjoyed it for what it was, it caused so many questions.
Yeah, I think that's why again, I watched this one more than like The Great Fairy Escape. But this one was also one we just didn't watch that much because I think it had too much of that whole plot thing that even the kids of the family didn't. They were all like, I
It
don't
was
get it.
so
Like,
convoluted,
why?
even the
Yeah,
kids noticed.
it was a bit like either the kids noticed or they were like, I don't get it. Like, why? Like, they're just like, but why? Like, it's
Hmm.
so convoluted yet simple that even kids weren't quite on board with everything that happened. So, like, none of us fully enjoyed too much of this one.
Hmm.
So, it wasn't one we watched as much as, say, the first or the second, which were a lot more watched.
I guess that makes sense. I don't really have an explanation as to why I started liking them more. Maybe it was something akin to
They
Stockholm
do.
syndrome, but I just feel like the last three were way better than the first three.
Yeah, I think another thing is most of the people who at that time it was a lot of boys who were watching it. So I think they just enjoyed like the adventure more as opposed to the story about like finding a lost sister didn't have a magic to them as much. So like
Hmm.
they were like, I'd rather watch Tinkerbell go on a journey and like
Okay.
fight off rats than watch Tinkerbell find her secret sister and all that. So
I guess that makes sense. But yeah, eventually they are able to avert the apocalypse because Tinkerbell discovers that the Winter Fairy's frost powers are able to shield everything from the oncoming snowpocalypse.
mhm.
And they save everything. But at some point, Tinkerbell breaks the wing. I don't remember it happening, but you get like a revelation at the end, like, oh, her wing is broken. She will never fly again. But then it's magically fixed when she touches wings with her sister. And at that point, I thought it was going to be a revelation of like, oh, each fairy can heal the other if they use the magic of their wings. And now the king of the frost fairies can heal his wing. And but no, his wing is broken forever, I guess.
Yeah.
But then they decide nobody will ever be separated again, and the king and queen kiss, and I guess it's happily ever after.
Yep.
But after this, you start getting into, well, I guess there's only two left, but I feel like the last two, especially, even more than the one, The Secret of the Wings, I feel like they're actually proper movies. Like they don't feel like they're leaning on Disney synergy. They feel like they're actually trying to make a good movie that could potentially be released in the theater. Like I still feel like these wouldn't be fully theatrical quality, but the last two, more than anything that's come before, I feel like they get the closest to feeling like a theatrical movie.
Yeah.
And I feel like part of that is because they're kind of getting away from feeling like they have to tie into like Disney Channel stuff. Like the last two, the theme songs are not done by like Disney Channel kids. This one is for the Pirate Fairy, it's Who Am I by Natasha Bedingfield,
hmm
who is like an actual proper mainstream music star, not from Disney Channel. So I don't know if that has to do with it, but I don't know. These feel like they're not amazing or anything, but they just feel like they're on a higher tier than the others have been.
hmm
And this one opens with music that is very obviously based on the Peter Pan soundtrack. And you're flying towards the second star to the right. And this is where I was suddenly reminded, oh yeah, this is based on Peter Pan. I literally had completely forgotten. I I was not in Peter Pan mode. Like, even though I'm doing this whole series on Peter Pan, watching all of these had just, Peter Pan had disappeared completely from my mind. And then I was like, have they been in Neverland this whole time? I guess so. And this is also where you start getting away from Tinkerbell, which maybe helps this feel, not that Tinkerbell is a bad character or anything, but maybe it helps to follow new characters instead of just following Tinkerbell all the time. In this one, you're following a fairy named Zarina, who is voiced by Christina Hendricks. And when I first saw that it was Christina Hendricks, I was like, did they do this because they're both in Good Girls? Because Christina Hendricks is like the main character on Good Girls. Mae Whitman is the third. Like there's three main cast members, but like you have Christina Hendricks and then Retta and then Mae Whitman, and I always think
Hmm.
of them in that order. But this was before Good Girls, I guess, so it's just a coincidence. Because I was thinking like this is a weird thing to have a tie-in to a show for adults, but nope, it was just a coincidence.
It's yeah.
Random weirdness.
Yeah.
And another thing probably that added to why I liked this movie more is that Zarina asks so many questions that I've had. She's like actually trying to figure out how the lore of her own land works.
Yeah.
Like she is asking the questions that all the other fairies should have been asking hundreds of years ago.
Hmm.
She's like, why does this happen this way? Why do we do things this way? Why are we only
Yeah.
allowed to do this? Why can we not do that? And I was like, this character is actually thinking, and I like her.
Yeah. Like they never give you an actual answer, but
No, I did notice that. I was like, she's asking the questions, and I like that, but you don't get an answer. And it makes sense that they wouldn't answer the questions. And I guess I'm fine with it because of what this series is. But I like that they're at least asking.
yeah.
But yeah, she is a dust keeper fairy. So her job revolves around pixie dust, and most of her questions have to do with how pixie dust works. But Fairy Gary, who is the guy in charge of the dust keeper fairies, doesn't like her questions and basically tells her to do her job and stop asking questions.
You don't understand. We live in a communist society, okay?
No thinking. But it turns out she's been doing pixie dust experiments and coming up with different magical ways to use pixie dust that nobody had ever thought of before. And she goes and gets Tinkerbell to show her what she's been doing because she had a breakthrough. And she likens her experiments to the way Tinkerbell was tinkering with different things and changed how the Tinker Fairies worked. And she's hoping that this will lead to something similar for the Dust Keeper Fairies until she accidentally causes this massive plant explosion, which grows a huge vine and destroys the pixie dust factory. And like they don't say that she's banished, but for all intents and purposes, she gets banished. Maybe it's a self-banishing, but she is fired
Yeah.
specifically and leaves.
Hmm.
So then you pick up a year later, and the fairies are having a Four Seasons festival. All the fairies are gathered in one place, and Zarina comes back in, and she's sneaking around planting poppies everywhere, putting people to sleep. And I was like, did they do this as a Wizard of Oz reference? The only place I have for context of poppies being used to put people to sleep is The Wizard of Oz. I'm not
Mm.
sure that poppies actually cause drowsiness. Maybe I should look that up. But to me, like poppies being a thing to cause sleep is a Wizard of Oz thing.
So I guess like Poppy's name derives from sleep bringing, the Latin term for sleep bringing. So I guess that's where sleepy poppies come from.
Oh, well, I knew that they were used in making opium, and I guess opium is a sedative. So,
Hmm.
okay, I guess that makes sense.
The more you know.
So I guess they're probably a reference to that more than the Wizard of Oz, and the Wizard of Oz was probably their use there was also a reference to that.
Hmm.
So they were just referencing the same thing rather than this referencing the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. But yeah, she's using poppies to put all the other fairies to sleep, and the only people that escape are Tinkerbell and her friends because they notice in time and are able to hide, and which one? Clank?
Yeah. Clank is the one who does not fall asleep.
Yes, because he was in the outhouse.
Yeah.
And then I was like, fairies use the bathroom? This had not been something that ever crossed my mind before. Do fairies need to use the bathroom, apparently?
They answer the questions we didn't need to know and give us more questions with answers we never get.
Apparently. Okay, whatever. But yeah, so he escaped being put to sleep along with the main cast of fairies. So they go after Serena and they put him in charge of watching over all the asleep fairies. Then they give him, I think it's the same machine from the last thing, like
Yeah.
the snow machine, even though it was thrown into the river. She must have made a new one. So he has to like hurriedly pedal this thing the entire time they're gone, apparently, to cause snow to fall over the winter fairies so they don't die while they're all asleep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, whatever. I guess this is another thing that they probably could have just the amount of retconning that they do, they could have just been fine. Just let them sleep and they would have been fine. I don't know. Well, they follow her and they discover that Serena is now the captain of a pirate ship. Well, they follow her and discover that she has stolen their blue pixie dust because we've already established that the blue pixie dust is needed to use to make the regular pixie dust so that they can fly. And without the
Hmm.
blue pixie dust, they are going to eventually run out and then they won't be able to fly anymore. So they've got to get
Yeah.
this blue pixie dust back.
Hmm.
So they follow her, and now she's the captain of a pirate ship, and they are going to use this blue pixie dust to make a new pixie dust factory and create enough pixie dust to make the pirate ship fly so that they can go back to the real world and rob all of the famous museums. And they had a whole list of things they were going to do, like steal mummies from Egypt. But
Hmm.
basically, if something was famous, they were going to steal it in their flying pirate ship,
Yeah.
which is ridiculous, but whatever, it works for this. So they try and get this stuff, the blue fairy dust back from them, and she has, in the meantime, created all of these different colors of the rainbow pixie dust, and she throws it at them, and it somehow switches all their powers around. And now they have also new outfits to go with the new powers. So they've got to learn how to use all their new powers. Tinkerbell is now a water fairy, and the other main one is Rosetta, who is an animal fairy now, and she hatches a crocodile, which as soon as that thing came out of the egg, I was like, okay, this is supposed to be the origin story of the crocodile that eats Captain Oak's hand. But that thing was actually really cute, and I kind of want a little toy of that crocodile. It was a really cute version of that crocodile.
It was.
I mean, I already love like animated lizards, like Rapunzel's Pascal and the little
Hmm.
lizard from Frozen 2.
Hmm.
Like this could just fit right alongside them. It was that level of cute, adorable lizard.
Yeah.
So they all make their way back to the pirate ship. You also see a pirate here, voiced by Tom Hiddleston, weirdly enough. I think this was like right in the middle of him coming out as one of the Avengers. Well, not an Avenger at that point, he's Loki, but
Yeah.
as a character in the Avengers movies. So I don't know if that was supposed to be the Disney synergy, but it was kind of strange to have such a big name in a movie like this, but it worked, I guess.
Hmm.
And they discover that they've created this secret hideout in Skull Rock, I think, from the
Yeah.
original Peter Pan movie, where they've recreated the pixie dust factory. They're making all this pixie dust, and they all get captured. And the pirates turn on Zarina once she has everything up and running. So she gets locked in a lantern like Tinkerbell in the original Peter Pan movie,
Hmm.
and the rest get kept in a wooden crate by Oppenheimer, the ship's cook. Like, why did they name him Oppenheimer? Like,
Yeah, I know.
it's such a random, weird, specific name because, like, Oppenheimer is the guy who created the nuclear bomb, but he's like, this guy has nothing to do with anything like that. So I don't think it was a reference to that.
No, I think it's just a name they came up with.
It was weird, but he's kind of hilarious. I love him talking to the portrait of his hideous mother. They eventually get set free by the baby crocodile. Then there's like long sequences of like fighting the pirates because they take off in the pirate ship and they're threatening to kill Zarina, and like this goes on for a while. But
Hmm.
it never felt boring. It just new ways to fight the pirates kept happening.
Yeah.
This is another reason why I felt like this felt like a show because most of these movies could have been wrapped up in a half an hour, but they kept doing different things to stretch it out. Even
Yeah.
though it didn't really feel stretched out, but like there was so many like fight sequences of the fairies like
Hmm.
fighting and like they make Captain Hook fly like he's not Captain Hook yet, but they make him fly and then there's like an aerial battle and yeah,
Yeah.
it went on for quite a while. But ultimately, they beat the pirates and they go back home. And Zarina is welcomed with open arms for some reason. And they're now like fine with all of her stuff. And they make up a whole new category of fairy for her. She's now a fairy dust alchemist. Okay. Like, I feel like that this was wrapped up a bit too neatly. Like the way she was basically banished to coming back, having fully explored everything that she was banished for
Hmm.
beyond the point where she was banished for it, and now it's fine. Okay.
Yeah, I think the idea was that Fairy Gary got mad and said you shouldn't come back to work. And then she left. Like I think the idea was that they never meant for her to completely leave, and everyone felt really guilty about it. Like that at that point she had left and there was no way for them to just talk about it. It's one of those situations where if you had talked about it, the movie wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
And so that's why it wrapped up super easily because I think it was like more like she was like, "Oh, I did a terrible thing," and they're like, "No, we were just mad at you because you wrecked everything. It's not like we wanted you to leave forever."
Okay, that makes sense. You've solved it.
I've solved the case. I've cracked the case. I will say I've seen this one. I think I've seen this one the most. This one was the most popular in my family.
Well, you did mention about more boys and liking
Yeah.
the action. This one would have been the most
Yep.
action-packed of all of these.
Everyone liked the action. A lot of people liked the Peter Pan elements being in the movie.
Maybe that's why I like this one the most.
Yeah.
I feel like there's so many areas where I am not a stereotypical boy, but I did really, even though the fight sequences went on for a long time, it all was enjoyable. And I
Yeah.
felt like it was really creative. So maybe that's why this one was one of my favorites. I think this
Like,
actually
yeah.
probably was my favorite because I did
Yeah.
enjoy the next one too, but probably not to the degree I enjoyed this one.
Hmm. Yeah. I think just like this one, it has like it's got the Peter Pan elements, it's got kind of the adventure to it. It feels like situations happen without it just kind of happening. Like, for example, in The Secret of the Wings, it's like, well, we have to knock off the things so that we can create a massive blizzard. Just and you're like, okay, I guess we'll just have to suspend our belief that that's how that would have happened. It's like it makes sense how things happen. It had the
Yeah.
songs in it, so
Hmm.
like it kind of had a little bit of a musical element. So like, that helped like kids enjoy it. The characters were funny. The supporting cast did more.
That's true. Yeah. That is one thing that I did really enjoy. The supporting cast had a much bigger role for this movie.
Yeah,
They actually
like
had things to do.
yeah, they had things to do and they weren't just there because they're part of Tinkerbell's gang kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, and also this one ends with a mid-credit scene with Smee
Yeah.
rescuing Captain Hook at sea. And I think Jeff Bennett did his voice,
Yes.
and I think he also did his voice for both Return to Neverland and Jake and the Neverland Pirates.
That doesn't surprise me.
Because I think Corey Burton. It's not been that long. It's why I mean it's been like 6 months since I've seen the others, but
Hmm.
I feel like Corey Burton was. Let me look this up. I think Corey Burton and Jeff Bennett were the two actors that were doing like the follow-up Peter Pan stuff. Yeah, Jeff Bennett was Mr. Smee in Return to Neverland,
Hmm.
and Corey Burton was Captain Hook. Yep, they probably could have gotten Corey Burton back as Captain Hook for this.
Yeah, they probably could have. It's kind of more of that the studio wanted a big name to tack on to the poster
Yeah,
kind of thing.
yeah, and I mean for a role like this, Tom Hiddleston works.
Yeah.
Well, the last movie is Tinkerbell and the Legend of the NeverBeast. And for the previous couple of movies, you had Tinkerbell was taken out of the title.
Hmm.
So Secret of the Wings and The Pirate Fairy did not have Tinkerbell in the title.
Yeah.
But this one, they put Tinkerbell back in the title, and she doesn't show up till almost halfway through the movie.
Yeah, it's like the least amount she's ever been in any of the movies.
It was so weird because I like when they have Tinkerbell in the title, I expected, I mean, she's been the main character for the entire series.
Hmm.
So then when you open the movie and you're following Fawn, it's just weird. Like I have no problem with that because like Fawn was a good pick for a character to follow in this movie. And I kind of like if the movies had kept going, I think that should have been a direction that they could have taken this,
Yeah.
following a different fairy for each movie rather than only focusing on Tinkerbell.
Yeah.
But it was just weird that they put Tinkerbell in the title and then you're
Hmm.
just following Fawn.
It should have just been called the Legend of the NeverBeast,
Yes.
just like, Secret Fairy and Secret of the Wings and stuff like that.
Yeah, it should have. But in this one, Fawn has been recast, and I'm not really sure why, except for the fact that it's Jennifer Goodwin. And I'm guessing they just wanted a bigger name. I don't know. I guess the actress who was playing Fawn after America Ferrera, she never really did anything big, so maybe she didn't want to.
Hmm.
Like there's this is me speculating. No one online is saying this. This is just me wondering why Jennifer Goodwin got this role.
Yeah.
But it could have been for Disney Synergy. I'm not sure how the timeline lines up, but she was Snow White in Once Upon a Time.
Yeah.
And I think this probably would have been before Zootopia, but she was Judy Hopps. So I don't know. But she did a good job. She was a good choice if they're going to
Yeah.
recast her. She was a good one. So this one, you open with this green comet flying over Pixie Hollow, which is not really explained. And then you're following Fawn as she's getting in trouble for saving a baby hawk because hawks eat fairies. And she reforms after she's gotten in trouble for this until she finds this giant monster, the NeverBeast.
Hmm.
And I don't know what they were going for with the look of this thing, but to me, at first glance, I thought it was a more cartoony version of the Bandersnatch from Tim Burton's Alice in Wonderland. But also the way it was moving and the expressions on his face, I kind of thought it looked like Sweetums from the Muppets. But then Fawn thinks it looks like a cross between. She uses the Latin names, so I'm not 100% sure, but I think she uses the Latin names for an opossum and a bison, which makes sense because the tail looks very
Hmm.
opossum-like,
Yeah.
and it's a massive hulking creature, kind of like a bison.
Yeah.
And it eventually gets horns too, so I guess all descriptions are valid. But then you also get introduced to a new class of fairies in this movie who you've never seen before, and I imagine that if the series went on, you would never see again. The Scout Fairies, led by Nyx, who was voiced by Rosario Dawson,
Yeah.
which I was surprised by. I don't know why. I just never expected to see Rosario Dawson in a movie like this. But then also, there's another character named Fury, who is voiced by Denai Guerrera. Another name I would never expect in a movie like this. She plays Okoye in the Black Panther
Yeah.
and Avengers movies.
Yeah.
It was like, this is so random that they got these big name stars for this movie. And
Yeah.
her character really has very few lines. And she's another
Hmm.
one that they recast for the UK version. They put Mel B in her place for the UK version. And Mel
Huh.
B is from the Spice Girls.
Yeah.
So I guess that's probably why they did it, because the Spice Girls are bigger in the UK than they were in America. But still, it's
That's
like
still strange.
a random recast.
Yeah.
But anyways, Fawn ends up naming this creature Gruff, and it starts building a bunch of towers around Pixie Hollow because it has this glue-like spit. So it starts stacking up rocks with the spit, which
Hmm.
is weird, but it works for what you eventually find out. And she eventually shows her friends, and this is where Tinkerbell shows up. It's like, we're like a third to halfway through this movie, and Tinkerbell is only now showing up. She wants to show the queen also, but when she gets to the queen, she finds Nyx there explaining that she's been researching this creature because Nyx saw the creature briefly, and she found this legend of the NeverBeast that says that a green comet will pass overhead. I think it's like every 1,000 years, and it wakes up the NeverBeast, who builds towers all around Pixie Hollow and transforms into a massive bat-winged creature and destroys Pixie Hollow. And this is again where how does the timeline work? How old is Pixie Society? Because they know this happens every 1,000 years.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
it's
at
another
the least has to be 2,000 years.
yes. It's another thing where I was like, you're overthinking this, just go with it. So they decide they're going to hide Gruff, but he eventually does transform into this thing that Nick said he would, and he ends up injuring Tinkerbell. They think he injured Tinkerbell. It turns out later that he was saving her. But because Tinkerbell got injured, even Fawn thinks he's now dangerous. So she helps the Scout Fairies capture him. And while all this is happening, there's like this green storm gathering in the sky, and it seems to be getting worse. But even now that he's captured, it's still getting worse.
Hmm.
So all the fairies decide to free him, and they help him finish his, or they help him get to all his towers, and he starts collecting lightning. It's like this lightning does not act like real lightning, but they're in a fairyland, so just go with it.
Yeah.
The lightning is like it strikes down onto the tower, but then it sticks to him and it follows him as he's flying.
Yeah.
But then he gets to the last tower and Nyx destroys it, and then the lightning starts setting everything on fire. But he somehow manages to fly through the sky and collects all the lightning, and it explodes and saves Pixie Hollow, and
Hmm.
his horns and wings end up getting burnt off. And like it's not horrifically graphic, but the way it happened, it was almost kind of jarring to me because it was
Yeah.
the least child-friendly thing that I'd seen so far. Just his
Yeah.
like shriveled, bony wings as they collapse into dust.
Yeah.
And it seems like Fawn is killed, but then he still has some like residual green lightning energy, and
Hmm.
he zaps her like a defibrillator and revives her. And then they all have to get together and rebuild Pixie Hollow, and Gruff is helping them, but he's like getting more and more tired. And then the fairies realize that he has to hibernate because apparently he will sleep for 1,000 years. And then it's like they hold a funeral for him, and like I don't know why, but this is like the most emotional thing in this entire series. It was the most melancholy way to end this movie. And since they canceled the series after that, it's the most
Yeah.
melancholy end. So,
Yeah.
so, such a downer note to end this entire series on.
Yeah, like you didn't even get like a happy ending where they're like, well, at least we still have our friendship for the times we spent together. No, it's like, goodbye, I'll never see you again. Credits
Yeah,
roll. And you're like, wait, what?
yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I felt like. Yes, it's technically a happy ending. He saved Pixie Hollow. All the fairies are fine. But like, just the way that they executed this whole scene,
Yeah.
it
It
felt
wasn't
like a
happy.
funeral.
Yeah, everyone was like sad. Fawn was in tears, and you're just like, what happened?
Yeah. I was like,
Like, no wonder your none of the kids wanted to return for another one. You emotionally scarred them.
maybe that's why your family didn't like this one. That
It
actually makes perfect
very
sense.
it very well could have been. Honestly, like I do not agree that it's the worst out of all of them. I think, in my opinion, my least favorite is the Great Fairy Rescue.
Yeah.
I think it could come from I have seen that one multiple times and I don't really ever really want to watch it again just with how much I've watched it. But like I don't really want to watch the NeverBeast ever again either because like it was such a downer ending. It's like, well, okay.
Yeah. I mean, if I had to watch any of these again, this would probably be near the top of my list,
Hmm.
but more so for the first half of the movie than the second.
Yeah, like the last bit's just like I think my two least favorite is probably The Great Fairy Rescue and The Secret of the Wings.
Hmm.
Just because The Secret of the Wing ones kind of infuriates me with how like little anything happens and it's so convoluted.
That is true. I did like it more than the previous three, but it is very convoluted. And I don't want to say it breaks the lore because, like, what
Oh,
lore?
it
They
very
break the
well
lore
does
in
break the
every
lore.
movie, but that one more seemed to break more lore than anything else.
Yeah.
But I still liked it well enough, I guess.
No, I understand. But like I think like I did watch the best ones in my opinion the most because I mean I've seen Pirate Fairy so many times. I can like legitimately like beat by beat tell you exactly like what's gonna happen while we watch it. I'm like, okay, and then she's going to take 3 steps and then hop and then like I can tell you exactly because I think for like a month or so I my family watched like every single day. And so like I didn't watch it every single time, but like it was constantly played.
Yeah.
So like I was like, okay, I know exactly because like one of the little kids would want to watch it because it was one of the movies that they had easy access to, and they were very into repeating the same media.
What that is such a kid. My family did the same thing. That is such a kid's thing to do. Like you find something you like and then just watch it to death. We did that
Yeah,
with Mary Poppins. We borrowed that from somebody and watched it all the time until we had to give it back. And then I don't know
yeah,
that I ever watched it again while I was a kid. I think I didn't see it again until I was an adult because we watched it to death.
yeah. That's the thing. Like, I think it's just the familiarity, and you know that you're gonna like it, as opposed to going to see a movie and you're like unsure if you're gonna like it.
Hmm.
Like as a kid, you're just like, well, I know I'm gonna have a blast watching this, so I'm gonna watch it like just nonstop because I never want it to end. So like Pirate Fairy, I've seen the most. I think it is probably the best out of all of them.
Yeah, I think thinking back, not that I want to rank them all, but I think that would
Yeah.
probably be my favorite as well.
Yeah. And then like I liked the Never Beast one, but again the ending, and I appreciate them trying to like branch out and create more, like add more character to these cast of characters that we have been
Hmm.
hanging out with for 6 years. And we only just got like a little bit of character added to at least one of them. Like they
Hmm.
had like very basic character traits that they never really moved past. And
Yeah.
it was nice to see like a more in-depth look into these characters that again we've known for 6 years. But it is a bit sad that like that's how we ended the entire franchise. It's like, yeah, that big lovable friend, he is basically dead because they're never gonna see him again because apparently fairies don't live over 1,000 years except if you're maybe the queen. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't, again, I don't know
Again,
the
making us
timeline. I don't know how old she is.
again, you're making me think of Death of Fairies. Like, why is this? I was like, why is this a recurring theme? Like, either they're dead, they're dying, they are potentially drowning, or their entire civilization and species future has been destroyed. Like,
I didn't really think about it, but the stakes are oddly high in a lot of these.
yeah,
Well, I don't really have any more notes other than that because, well, we've gone on a lot longer than I expected to.
yeah. I feel like at this point I have said my piece about a silly Disney fairies Tinkerbell movies, which are surprisingly like they're not very in depth, but you surprisingly talk about them a lot. They're good talk pieces. So there you
Yeah.
go. Go on a date, watch Tinkerbell movie, and you can both bond over the complexities of the fairy realm and why it makes
Yes.
no sense. I think then when you go to dinner, you can have a conversation to talk about how you don't understand how the fairy world worked because I don't think the people who were working on the film understood how the fairy kingdom worked.
No, I think you're pretty much spot on there. I have a feeling they were just making it up as they went.
But all in all, I think it's fine.
Yeah. No, actually, for these, not that there's a very high bar, but like if you're classifying these alongside the other direct-to-video sequels that Disney made, most of these are a lot better than anything that they've
Yeah.
done before. There were a few, I don't want to say hidden gems because I don't think any of them were ever as good as the originals, but
Hmm.
there were a few that maybe could stand up to these. But all in all, I feel like the Tinkerbell series was probably as good as the direct-to-video sequels we're ever going to get.
Yeah.
So I guess if they're going to kill the direct-to-video line, this is a good note to go out on.
Yeah.
As a whole, it had a downer ending, but as a whole,
Yeah. Such a downer ending, man.
well, 3 hours later, I guess that's probably all we have to say about Tinkerbell and all of the various sequels to Tinkerbell. So until the next time, do you want to let people know where they can find you if they want more from you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Katie Draws Things, where I do not draw fairies, but I draw other things, and I have good time over there, so check it out if you want.
Okay. Thanks for listening to the Disney Movie Marathon. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe and follow my co-hosts as well. My link tree and all of our links will be in the description below. If you want more of my content, all my podcasts are available on YouTube as well as most podcast platforms. If you enjoyed this show, check out one of the other podcasts or check out my Patreon for bonus and extended episodes you won't find anywhere else. We'll be back soon with another brand new episode, so thanks for listening and we'll see you next time.